Sabila, you're chasing a serious story that started with a murder on Friday night in New York, and it now has a grieving family calling for a return to stop and frisk. What do you got?
Bill, it's been a brutal weekend. 4 people were killed. Among them was Jihad Marshall. He was 23 years old. Because of his death, now his father and his uncle are leading the march to reinstate stop and frisk in New York City. They appealed directly to Mayor de Blasio, saying, please reinstate stop and frisk.
Mayor de Blasio, I just think you should not stop and frisk. As long as you have some organization behind it and do it the right way, it can work.
The reason why they want stop and frisk to be reinstated is because tragedy struck close to home, and Jihad Marshall was with some friends. A gunfight broke out. He hid next to a building, thought the fight was over, walked out, and got shot in the back.
Someone called me and told me that my son was shot. Then they called me back and told me that he was gone. Then they called me back and said they brought him back. That they was taking him to New York Hospital. But when I got there, the doctor told me there was nothing else that they could do.
Throughout this interview, Jihad's father, Eric, just had tears in his eyes. It was very hard for him to speak, very emotional. I asked him about Jihad. What kind of a person was he?
He was a jokester. He could make you laugh. Full of energy.
23. His dream was to be a chef, and he was going to start his job as a chef on Sunday. Mayor de Blasio has been confronted about this uptick in crime, and Mayor de Blasio kind of dismissively has been quoted as saying, well, it's gang violence. Well, Jihad's father said, that's insulting because you don't know my son. My son was not in a gang, and yet he was shot. So you can't just say, oh, it's just gang violence. There's many different reasons why people are shot. You can't just paint it with a broad brush.
Well, the reality is murder happens under stop and frisk and not under stop and frisk. The ACLU released a report that says that you get a gun in 1% of stop and frisk arrests. If you've got to go to unconstitutional means, singling out black and Latino men, putting them up against the wall and searching them in order to get guns off the street, you're changing the tone of the country. You actually just can't do that.
Well, the reason why stop and frisk is so controversial is because people feel it's racist. It's because you're black that the cop stops you. I feel that it's not, especially having spoken to Stacy. He said, we want police to treat everybody with respect. So don't just take a black man and throw him against the wall and search him. Do it respectably. Announce that you're doing a stop and frisk. The whole point of this is not race, it's getting the guns off the street. People do not realize how many guns really are on the street. A lot of young black men have them, and the community I was in was a public housing project in Astoria, Queens. He said the majority of young men just hanging out have a gun on them.
I would just ask this one question, and God bless this poor family, God rest this poor young man's soul. Were they calling for a return to stop and frisk before their son was shot?
They were not, but unfortunately it does take tragedies like this to make laws have been passed for tragedies.
What that doesn't, I don't see how
But
that
it
holds
does,
any water.
because
It
the
doesn't
same
matter.
kid who was killed would have been the same one up against the wall getting illegally searched by police.
Yeah, you know what though? It's illegal to have a gun in New York. So the idea that the law is doing nothing, it comes down to cops on the beat.